Hello, listeners. Before we get started with today's episode, I just want to let you know that we're debuting our new theme song today, the intro and the outro, which was done specifically for my program by Bombay Beach Revival. And I really want to thank Daniel DeBlanc for his efforts. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoy it. You are listening to Stories from Real Life, a podcast by engaging storytellers for engaged story listeners. Here's your host, author and journalist, Melvin E. Edwards. Hello, and welcome to this March 12th episode of Stories from Real Life. I'm your host, Melvin E. Edwards, and my guest today is a good one. He's a columnist, author, musician, most impressively, barbecue judge, construction worker, and creator of the blog and podcast, Sean of the South. I'm happy to be joined on today's show by Sean Dietrich. John, welcome to the Stories from Real Life podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. It's quite a pleasure to be here. I hope you can hear the train in the background, letting you know that I'm in Birmingham, Alabama.
And I hear lots of birds too, so that's a nice sound.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here. So I've talked to some people about you, and I've watched some YouTube videos that you've done to prepare for this podcast, and most people seem to have a hard time pegging you. So to some, you're like Mr. Rogers. To some, you're Louis Grizzard, among other names that I've heard. But I thought about this for a little while, and I decided to try a new moniker on you today.
Okay.
What do you think about Mark Twang? You know, since you're from the South and all, Twang.
Twang. I like that. That took a second to sink in.
Yes.
I'm going to own that. I'm going to put that one on my tombstone.
Nice.
I like that. You came up with that on your own?
I did.
Man, you're in the right business.
Maybe I'll write about this in my next book. This is already fun.
Yeah, that's a great. Mark Twain is one of my heroes. When I was a child, after my dad died, I started diving heavily into Mark Twain books, and they meant so much to me. From what's interesting about him as relation to a child is he meets readers on so many different levels. He can write Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, and it comes off as children's literature, but then there's these other levels and layers to it. And the older I got in my life, I found that he was speaking to a different age group in one broad stroke. And so I still read Mark Twain almost I would say every couple months or so I'll read a couple books of his, and I always pick out something for the stage of life that I'm in now. That's one of his remarkable talents. So I wear that title with pride. My goodness.
Nice. I'm a big Mark Twain fan too, but now there's Mark Twang to compete with Mark Twain.
It works.
So there's so much I want to talk to you about, but let's start with your music.
Okay.
So you recently played at the Grand Old Opry. And when you received that invitation, did you think in your mind, in your face, Taylor Swift?
No. I felt like I was invited in through the back door, is how it felt. I felt like a guy like me going on to the Grand Old Opry at this stage of life is almost like an anomaly, because most of the people who do go on to the Grand Old Opry, especially to make debuts, they're younger people. They're young people with a career ahead of them. And I am, for lack of a better term, a middle-aged guy with a career behind him. And not a good one either. I mean, just a kind of I don't even know what you call it, if you call it a career at all. And so going into the Grand Old Opry was quite a different experience than I imagine it is for the younger people. And I was there with some Opry hopefuls who were younger, and I could tell we were having a very different experience. I've been through a lot of different things, at this stage of my life, and they have yet to go through those things, and they've written songs that they want to share, whereas I am, at this stage of my life, I'm exploring the songs of my ancestors, and those are the songs that I share. I like going as far back as I can to to touch the people who came before me, my forerunners, and that's something that comes with a little bit of age. You know, when you're younger, you're constantly moving forward, but when you get older, you're constantly looking back at things that have preceded you. So anyway, going to the Grand Old Opry was extremely humbling. I got there. They had a parking space with my name on it, which was just, it was a metal sign that they had printed with my name on it that said Sean Dietrich, Grand Old Opry. And we parked, and I was immediately goose flesh all over my body. We walked into that back door entrance, which was just something that is too great to even describe in words. There was a huge vibrating twin diesel RV outside with some, artist inside of it. And I'm walking in with my guitar strapped around my shoulder, and we get in and they have to check me at the metal detector. And the lady who's waving the wand over my body, she says, "Are you Sean?" She's an older lady. I said, "Yeah. I'm Sean." She said, "Can I get my picture with you?" And I said, "What?" She said, "Well, I read your blog every day, and all the ushers here, we're fans of your blog." And I started to, tear up and cry. I said, "Well, if you want your picture with a degenerate guy like me, go ahead." And so we all got our picture together. They led me back through the hallway, and in the back of the hall was my dressing room, which had been used by Dolly Parton. And I looked into that mirror and I wondered what sorts of things that mirror had seen. And anyway, I hung out in that room. I got dressed, and eventually they came and got me and said, "It's time." And I walked through that corridor, and the rest of it was a blur. And I've been back several more times, and I'm going back again, and it's quite positively the most humbling, knee-breaking experience I've ever had. I mean, it'll bring you to your knees. I cried on stage when I first got out there the very first time. I doubled over and cried before I took the microphone. It was amazing.
I probably would have cried just being in the audience.
Well, they were probably crying too once they heard me open my mouth.
Had you ever been there before, playing there?
Never played, no. I've only been there as a child and as a spectator. And when I was a child, we lived in Spring Hill, Tennessee. My daddy worked on the GM plant, which was then the Saturn plant. He built it. He was one of the crew who built it, and they even made him a foreman. And that plant was one of the biggest things of his life. It's a huge automotive plant. And since we lived in Spring Hill, he would take me to the Opry, and we had such a great time there eating hot dogs and popcorn. And I can remember the seat we sat in, and I can remember being a child standing on that fold-up seat with my hands on the back and seeing the men in the cowboy hats take the stage, and I could hear the twin fiddles and the steel guitars. And I remember telling my mother and father that I wanted to do that. And my mother, the night of that Opry appearance that I made, said that she remembers me saying that as a child, and she remembered looking at my daddy and saying, "Yeah, sure, you can do that, Sean." And she said, "How many, kids are saying that to their parents? And you have a better chance of becoming an astronaut." And there I was up on that stage, and my mother that night when I was there sat in that very same row that we sat in when I was a kid.
Wow. I'll bet you she cried. I'm not even going to ask if she did. I know she did.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and before the show, I drove out to Spring Hill to visit that automotive plant. I got out of my car and I walked around it and just kind of put my hand on the metal, because my daddy was an iron worker, so I knew these beams behind my hand were beams that he had laid before he died, and said, "Daddy, tonight I'm going to be on the Opry."
That's incredible. So we're going to come back around to your dad a little bit later. So I got to know this. Did you carve your name on the wall with a pocket knife?
At the Opry?
Yes.
Boy, no, but I should have. I should have put my number in the restroom stall. No,
So
I didn't do that. I'm trying to think what mark I did leave on the Opry. Oh, well, I went into the bathroom right before my appearance, and I was going to the bathroom, and I believe that I was peeing next to Ricky Skaggs. And that goes down as, one of the great moments of my life. I looked over at him and I wanted to say so bad, "You're Ricky Skaggs," you know that? But I held my tongue.
Yeah, that would have been awkward. So you talked about singing songs of your ancestors, and in your book you talked about, or at least I think it was your book, it might have been a video I watched, talked about learning songs in German when you were a kid.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Did you sing in German at the Grand Old Opry?
No, I didn't sing in German. I should have. I'm trying to think if I sang a few songs in Spanish too, but I didn't sing in Spanish there either. Now that but no, I just sang in straight up hillbilly.
Straight up twang.
Yeah, exactly. Mark Twang.
Yes. All right. So was being at the Opry better than being a barbecue judge?
Ooh, that's a difficult question because there's something very gratifying about a barbecue competition. I don't know. They could match each other equally. They could match each other in the right circumstance. I love barbecue. Barbecue is incredibly. It's something I will go out of my way to find. We do a lot of traveling, and one of the main objectives when we're on the road, going across the backwoods and the backwaters of especially the Southeast, we will find barbecue. So I've eaten barbecue in almost every state, and we have really stumbled onto some true gems.
There's some really good ones here in South and Central Texas.
Ooh, I need you to take me around. Because I had some guidance when we were in Texas last, and we had some good barbecue, but I know that some of the best barbecue I ever had was in Texas, and it was I guess, West Central Texas. I'm trying to think of what town that would have been, but we were driving through, and as things got very rural, there was this little utility trailer set up outside of an abandoned gas station. And I saw smoke rising, and there was like a sign written on a bed sheet in spray paint, and I think it said something like barbecue. And we got out, and there was an older lady and her husband, and they were cooking this stuff over this 50-gallon barrel sized grill. And the guy, the man, this is what impressed me the most, he was painting the ribs and the pork shoulders and all that with a brush that had been dipped into a recycled Pennzoil bottle. And I thought, what is in that bottle? Golly. And he was painting this stuff, and he said,
Picasso.
And so he was painting that stuff, and I got as much as I could get. And I got into the truck, and I told Jamie, I said, this could be the best barbecue I've ever tasted. But I say that a lot, so.
So was it high up there on the list?
Oh, yeah, it was really high up there. They do brisket. There's not a lot of brisket in the Southeast. They do more pork shoulder and all that, but there's an art to the beef side of things. And in Texas, they do beef well. They do it very well.
Brisket is good, but when I was 15, I swore off brisket because I had eaten so much of it by that point in my life.
Yeah,
I'm a sixth generation Texan.
Ooh.
So there's been a lot of barbecue down my lineage.
Yeah.
And they serve brisket for every event, like weddings, funerals, family reunions, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah. It doesn't matter what the event is, there's brisket. And when I turned 15, I said, I don't want brisket ever again. And I stuck with that for quite a while, but I'll eat brisket now. I've gotten past that.
It's all pork here, and chicken some, but it's all pork. And brisket, I mean, I have walked into restaurants with, friends and stuff, and nobody even looks at the brisket. No one even thinks about it, because a lot of times we don't do it well here in this part of the world. And going out there, it's a real novelty for me, because beef barbecue is, wow, what's this, and it's wonderful. Oh my gosh, it's wonderful. You do it so well, and that they have that bark on it. It's just, whew.
Yes, that is the best part of it. All right, so come down here and I'll take you to a couple places. I guarantee you'll never forget them.
Oh, I would love that.
So back to being a barbecue judge for a second. Mm-hmm. What did you have to include on your resume to get a job like that? Because I want to figure out how to do it too.
Well, the first, I don't really know the first competition that I was asked to judge, I told them, I said, why are you asking me? They said, well, we need people. We need warm bodies. So they put me through it was a KC barbecue, KCBS thing, or KCBA, not BS. Although it's pretty close. And the first competition that I did, it was awesome. And I'm a very chatty guy, so I was chatting with all of the contestants in the entrance. And I found something special in pretty much everybody's barbecue. But I narrowed down personally along with the other judges. We were walking around, as a group of judges, and we were all from different walks of life. And the first guy that I narrowed down in my mind, is the clear winner, was a man who'd made ribs, and he was Korean, and his ribs were incredible, and of course the meat was fall off the bone good, which is how I was brought up to recognize a good rib. Well, the KC rules are the rib should not fall off the bone. It should, and there's rules that you have to do. So anyway, I still volleyed for him to be the winner. I said, this is the winner. And the whole group looked at me like I was a fool, and he did not even come close to winning. And all the people I picked as winners, the whole group voted.
You were overruled.
Yeah, so I realized quickly that I shouldn't be a barbecue judge, because I look for all the wrong things. But I've done a good number of competitions, and I enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. I mean, you're sick the next day and you never want to see barbecue again, but
like I was when I was 15.
Yes. And it's definitely a good idea to take a stool softener.
I lived in Maryland for quite a while, and so my oldest daughter and I have this joke about ribs that fall off the bone, because I learned there that was their only criteria for whether or not ribs were good. And it really doesn't take any technique of cooking them to make them fall off the bone. You just boil them first, and then you barbecue them. Okay. And that's what they did. That sort of cooks a lot of the flavor out of it.
Yeah, right. Interesting.
So I love barbecuing ribs, and so I say my ribs will not fall off the bone, but the work you have to put in will be worth it.
Oh yeah. I love ribs. Yeah. What style of ribs do you make?
Baby back generally.
Oh yeah. Oof.
Yeah, I can't tell you my secret because you got fans out there, and I don't want you to have to disappear. So,
well, I can't barbecue worth a cuss. The only thing I can really do is a beer butt chicken, and that's it. I just shove a can of beer up the chicken's backside, and I shut the grill, and I forget it.
All right, so you've done quite a few things in your life, as I mentioned in the opening. What accomplishment are you the most proud of?
Wow. I don't know. I would say the only accomplishment that I'm really ever proud of is when I come in contact with someone who has read something that I've written, and they say that it did something for them, and that people are very good and forthcoming, I've found, to tell you complimentary things about your writing, and they will tell you when it has helped them, but there's a certain tone to somebody's words when it really has had a profound impact, and you can tell that it really has truly had an impact on them. And sometimes it'll come in the form of letters, or someone will shake my hand, like when I'm at an event, and they'll tell me that, and we'll have a moment and something will kind of pass between us, and I'm I'll say, no, nothing I did really helped you. And I know that it's not me. Ultimately, it's not me. It's them. But my words maybe did have a little catalyst that pushed them in the right direction or helped them see the right direction to take themselves in. And that is extraordinarily gratifying. If I can do that at all in my life, or even just a few people, that makes my life worth it. And that's pretty much the only thing that I can take pride in. The rest is fluff. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares.
We do care. We all care.
my accomplishments, which are very few, are just, they're so temporary. They're so in everybody's. I mean, like you mentioned, Taylor Swift. She's the king of the world right now, but that lasts for how long? How many people in her audience even know the name Elvis? And before Elvis, how many people knew the name Rudy Valley? And it goes on even back into the 1800s. How many people actually knew, the Will Rogers or somebody of the day? So I'm grateful for what I'm able to do, but I realize it's extremely temporary.
All right. Well, you do it well, whether you think it's temporary or not. It will have some everlasting impact on somebody, on probably a lot of somebody's.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes. So it seems like what animates you the most is writing and storytelling. So if you hadn't experienced the kind of tragedy and failures that you did as a child, do you think you would have ever become a writer or a storyteller?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I would have had a reason to, because a story, no matter how anybody defines it, is a full circle in my mind. You start at one place, you go around the world, you take a journey, you do whatever it is you're going to do. You introduce new people, and you end up, if it's a good story, you end up at least coming to terms with where you started. You at least come to terms with it in a way that references the beginning. A good story to me starts somewhere, goes somewhere, and then references strongly the beginning at the end. And so every story that I tell in some way references my beginnings. And that to me is what makes my stories feel good to me. When I write a story, if I'm referencing emotions and things that I dealt with during my beginnings, then that feels as though I'm not writing to other people. I'm writing to me. And in fact, I think it was a couple years ago, I kind of had this moment where I was laying in bed. I was at a primitive cabin working on a book. I had weeks to spend on it, and I was just no human contact. I had to bathe in a bucket. There was electricity, but you couldn't use it for heat or anything, so it was cold. And I'm in bed at night one night, and I'm thinking to myself about the little boy that I was and some of the stuff I went through, which was difficult, not fun. And a lot of people don't go through things like that, and they're fortunate for that. And I thought of that little boy, and I thought, I wonder if it's possible to take love and send it back in time to that kid, because he could have used some love during that moment. I wonder if I can provide that for him, so that if the story had to replay itself all over again and that kid had to relive all these things again, if somewhere in the universe that hasn't happened yet, I realize this is very philosophical, but I'm getting somewhere with this. If that kid had to relive everything, and let's say he's a toddler right now and he's about to go through the worst part, if I can send love to that kid before that bad stuff happens, so that he has the grit and the determination to get through it, I wonder if that's possible. And I got to thinking, well, that's what storytelling is. Storytelling comes to us from our ancestors. It's the oldest art form there is. There were no books, there was no music, there was no nothing. We had the spoken word, and not even that was in its primitive form. And all we could do to talk to our young, to our people, was communicate to them things that had happened to us, things that we learned through our experiences, and we put these into story timeline form. Storytelling, it's so old, and every time you tell someone a story, you ultimately are trying to communicate something that is a lesson you learned. That moral has to be in every story, or it has no point. And so I think to myself, every time I write, I am writing to that little boy. I'm sending love to that boy. And if that boy is not me, it's another little boy or a little girl or a person. It doesn't matter. I'm sending it out, So yes, I think my beginnings put that desire into me.
Well, we've got a lot of things in common, and I'm about to touch on a couple of those things right now. So I hope you don't mind if we take this journey to a more serious destination for just a few minutes and talk about your dad.
Yeah.
So when I started reading your memoir, Will the Circle Be Unbroken, which I happen to have right here, I had to put it down for a little while after the first couple of chapters. That's because my dad died when I was 13 years old. So I was just a couple of years older than you were when your dad died.
Yeah.
So an event like that, I found sort of burns a hole in your consciousness, and that hole remains forever. So I'm now 57 years old and just a few weeks away from the 44th anniversary of my dad's death. And it so impacted me that to this day, I can still remember what I was wearing the day my dad died. So in some ways, I'm still the kid that I was on that April day in 1980.
Yeah.
Have you found that to be true for you, that a part of you is still an 11-year-old boy?
Absolutely. I mean, this year, this September will be the 30th anniversary of his death. I am that 11-year-old boy. I just have I'm trapped in an adult's body now. I still think the way that boy thought. I still have a lot of this. I have all the same desires that boy had. The changes that have happened to me have purely been external. I'm totally that kid, and I believe that you're right. It does. It creates it burns a hole into you. It makes you a different person as a boy. And I don't know what your situation was like or what other people's situations are like. As a boy, we look to our father as an example. I have a lot of friends who grew up with their fathers, and they're not aware that they're doing this. They're looking to him as an example, but it's little things, like when your dad gets sick, how does he react? How does he react when he has a cold? Is he one of those people who just sloughs it off and just says, yeah, it's no big deal, and he muscles through it? Or is he kind of like hypochondriac? Does he get real, does he kind of withdraw into himself and freak out about it? Or is he just kind of, does he make jokes about it? How does he react to being sick? I don't know. I don't remember. I remember certain things, but there's a lot that I don't know. Like one of my friend's dads really had a terminal illness just recently, and he got to watch his dad as an old man walk through this horrible experience to death. And even now, at this age, my friend is in his late 40s, got to watch how his father approached the end. That's a lesson that he learns by example, and I would bet that my friend picked up an approach to his own end through watching his father. These are lessons, millions and millions of lessons that you and I don't have. These are lessons that we had to teach ourselves. These are lessons that we, and ideas of how to approach life that we had to come up with ourselves, be our own fathers. Yes. And that is the most that's the most fraternal thing I feel with people who don't have fathers. In fact, I realized when I was 16 years old that all my closest friends, and there weren't many, but all of them were fatherless and have always been fatherless. I've never been extraordinarily close to someone who had a father. it's because we relate to each other without even knowing it. Even today, I look back, a lot of my friends, no father. Amazing.
Wow, that is amazing. Like you said, you sort of have to parent yourself in a way.
Yeah.
There's so many lessons I learned, had to learn along the way. Obviously, I made mistakes along the way. Some things figured out, some things still trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And I have a son who's getting married in May. And so the kind of father I am is a direct reflection of the memory I have of my dad. And actually, I wrote a book, my recent book, about my relationship with my dad and my relationship with my son. So I'll have to have you get that to
Yeah.
you so you can read it
Yeah,
sometime.
would love that. Would love that.
So now that you're a dad, how do you think the memories of your father influence the way you parent your child?
But I'm not a dad. I'm.
you're
We
not.
never. We
Okay.
have not had children. The closest I've
Okay.
come to it is I have a goddaughter.
Okay,
And,
that must be the one I saw in the video, and I
she's
shouldn't have made
blind.
that assumption.
No, it's all right. A lot of people think she is my daughter. She's blind. Tomorrow's her birthday. She was born on
Happy
February
birthday.
29th, just like Superman.
That my mom's birthday too.
Oh, really?
Tomorrow would have been my mom's birthday. Yeah.
Wow. She's blind. She was born a drug addicted baby, and she was foster kid, and she has had like 55 operations in her life, including open heart surgery. She's kind of she's got hearing loss in both ears. She's a remarkable child, and she wrote me. I have a lot of kids write me who read my stuff, I guess, and I don't. So her teacher had been reading her my stuff, and her name's Becca, and she wrote me, and her teacher sent me the letter, and I read it, and I said, wow, I've got to, I get a lot of kid letters, but this one I really need to meet. And so we met, and we have been best buddies ever since, me and her. And so then we became her godparents. So.
Oh, she likes to dance when you play the fiddle.
That's right. She has been my first. Her name's Becca, and my readers and everybody knows about her. She comes and performs with me at a lot of different shows. People just love her. She's such an uplifting child. She's extraordinarily positive after all she's been through. But being in her life has given me the only taste of a tiny taste of what parenthood would feel like, because I don't know. And it's remarkable how much of an influence I can feel from my father. Things that are just in my DNA, my consciousness, passed down from him that I shouldn't know how to do this. And one of the things, one little example of that is Becca and I were doing a benefit for United Way. She sings, and so I bring her up on stage with me, and I'll play guitar and she'll sing. And we were doing a sound check. And my dad was deaf in his left ear, so he was always real protective of his hearing because they'd ring. And I had ear problems growing up too. So when I was a kid, I had tubes in my ears, and so I always had this constant ringing. And as a musician, I'm very protective of my ears, and almost obsessively so. And I don't like loud noises. I won't go into places where it's too loud. I'm very, very particular about it because I had this constant ringing in my ears, just like he did. Well, we're doing a sound check on stage, and the sound guy is back there fumbling around with the board, and clearly he's confused and doesn't know what's going on. And there's this loud ring that just pops up, and she's on stage with me, and me, childless man that I am, I would normally go like this to myself, but my reaction in that split second was to cover her ears. And I remember that's something my father would have done. He would have covered my ears instead of his own when there was a loud sound. And I remember seeing myself do that, and I couldn't even believe that it just happened to me. It was just a weird moment.
Wow.
So silly, and it's so little. It's not a big thing, but it was enough for me to think, wow, it
was noticeable.
You have some of your dad in you.
Wow. That's pretty cool. So you called your dad a combination of Roy Rogers and Mickey Mantle. So
That's true.
When was
I
the last
forgot I
time
said
you
that.
when was the last time you rooted for the Kansas City Royals or watched a Western movie?
But I haven't rooted for the Royals since they were in the World Series. I was really proud of them since that was my daddy's team. That was one of his teams, and I hadn't rooted for them except then. That was such an interesting run when that happened. I wrote about it. I mean, it was very cool. And the last time I watched a Western was, I guess, night before last. I watched some Gunsmoke. There's a 24-hour Gunsmoke channel that just runs and runs on our streaming thing, and I sit out here on this very porch and put a little TV out here, and I'll play the fiddle, practice fiddle, and I'll watch Gunsmoke, and I love it.
Yeah, that's backwoods stuff right there.
Yeah.
with the high-tech streaming service, sitting on the fiddle watching Gunsmoke.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you drinking moonshine and with your coon dog?
But I do have the coon dog, and the moonshine's inside.
See,
I should be embarrassed because it's not moonshine. It's mostly like artesian, craft beer my wife gets from the store.
Yeah, well, I'll edit that out so you don't lose your Southeastern card.
Thank you.
You'll be back to Mark Twain before we're done with this.
That's right.
All right. So last question about your dad.
Okay.
Which was harder for you, to pass that last math class to complete your college degree, or writing about your dad in your memoir?
Love the math class for sure. My gosh, math does not fit with my brain. It is just not.
Same here.
Me and math don't work. Writing about my dad was, ironically, the easiest thing that I've ever done. You could probably relate to this. There's so much. It's like a wound that is infected, and there's pus that builds up, and it just got to get out. And if you don't get that pus out, it just grows, and there's even more. Well, I had, a lot of years of pus to get out, and I was fortunate enough to have had the blog, and that blog had been an outlet for many years for me of daily writing. I write every day. I publish every day, and I had written a lot of columns about my dad. I think like 500 or 600 columns about my dad. Maybe more if I include the columns where I reference him in an offhanded way. And that's a lot of time to get the tone in the tone underneath my belt of what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it. I really wanted to talk about him in a uplifting way, not necessarily. I didn't want him to be a villain, and I wanted to include plenty of humor in my writing. I didn't want this to be a dark book. I wanted it to be light and as much as it could be, somewhat fun to read, at least entertaining in a way. I wanted people to see his good. And so I had that little bit of experience underneath my belt so that when I did approach the book to write about my dad, it was like I had been training for it. I was ready, and I was so glad that I'd had that experience before I approached a subject like this, because I had gotten out a lot of the bad stuff in the blog, and I was able to approach it from a third-person point of view instead of just, the victim, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And it's interesting you mentioned third person, because the book I wrote about my dad, I went at it from a completely different perspective. I tried to write about it from the first person.
Oh,
and
wow.
Actually, I've got two books. The first book was written about my mom and her side of the family, which goes back 6 generations. And then the second book is about the male side of my family. And I used them both writing from the first person perspective.
Wow.
And it took a lot of imagination. I had a lot of facts, but obviously I had to be creative.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In the way I wrote this. And while I was writing the first chapter in the book about my dad, I'm sitting in the office where this is my home office here, and I'm writing the first chapter, and my wife comes in to bring me something or to ask me something, and I'm like bawling. And she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just writing."
You were there.
I was there. I was feeling his emotion. And
Amazing.
My dad had come from a very abusive background.
Yeah.
And he told me this story when I was very young, and so I was reliving him telling me the story, and then I was living the story, and where his dad was abusive to him. And when he was about 10 years old, he's made a conscious decision that if he ever had kids, he was going to be the opposite of everything he had seen from his dad.
Wow.
And imagine a 10-year-old having to make that kind of life decision, and he lived up to it. That was the best part for me. So the trajectory of our family changed because of my dad's resolve.
Wow.
So
as a 10-year-old boy.
Yeah. As a 10-year-old.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on before we're both in tears here. Okay. All right, this is the last topic I want to talk about.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about fried chicken.
Oh dear.
So we're not going to be politically correct here. We have stories to tell.
Okay.
All right, so tell me about your mom's fried chicken that was so good it converted your friend from Catholic to Baptist.
So fried chicken is a religion, and it really is. In my world, it goes hand in hand with religion. The only place remaining today that you're really going to get handmade fried chicken is at a religious institution. So you're going to go to church potlucks or socials, and that's where you're going to find the chicken that the old ladies make. Otherwise, you're reduced to family fried chicken, and you know this family fried chicken pretty well, and you might get it once a year, twice a year. Fried chicken, I've discovered, in much the same way as barbecue, but I would say more so because you can do a variety of different things with fried chicken, whereas barbecue is pretty much about smoke. And but fried chicken has nuances to it, and I've discovered, especially since I started riding and traveling around and visiting different churches and different events, is like the thumbprint of a good cook. And a lot of times the older women are the ones who make the best fried chicken to me. And because it takes a lot of training to get the nuance right. The color of the chicken's crust is imperative to the taste. It's not, some of it's lighter, some of it's darker, some of it has more pepper in it, some of it has a totally different batter. Oh man. So my mother has a very unique kind of fried chicken, and it's kind of, I could taste it blindfolded and know that it's hers. But my wife is a chef, and she graduated from culinary school right before I met her. She has another unique form of fried chicken. It's very traditional. It passed down to her from her father, who was the cook in her family, from his mother, from her mother. So it's a recipe, and her fried chicken, I can pick it out of a lineup. It's extremely identifiable. And we went to a funeral just recently in a tiny little town. A little town called Slocum, Alabama, which is a very rural town, and they're known for their tomatoes. They have a bunch of tomatoes, tomato farms there. And at the funeral, the ladies brought fried chicken, and there were about 3 or 4 of them on the line, different kinds, and every single one just had this different vibe to it. It was awesome.
It probably cooked in 10 years of unwashed cast iron skillets. That's probably what did it.
10 years of unwashed cast iron skillets and reused peanut oil. And that's another thing, the kind of oil they use in South Alabama. You're only going to fry in peanut oil. You're not going to fry in canola or safflower or whatever they're frying in different parts of the world.
Those fancy oils.
Yeah, exactly. So it's that has a different flavor.
Good to know. I'll have to try those out. Tell my wife's from Maryland, so I'll tell her to take away the canola oil and other oils and just go with peanut.
Peanut oil.
Because Sean's bona fide, and he told me that.
She'll stone me, but yeah.
You'll probably be okay, more than likely. Well, that's a good place to end it there. That's a good story. So our guest today has been multidimensional Sean Dietrich, who's popularly known as Sean of the South. Mr. of the South, thank you for joining the show today. I've enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. I appreciate you having me here.
Yes, and please tell your wife Jamie that I said thank you for being so patient with me nagging her to get you on the show. I appreciate her.
I'm proud to be here. I will tell her. I will deliver your message.
Thank you. So that's it for this week's episode of Stories from Real Life. Join us again next time for another great storytelling journey. Until then, don't forget to shine your light wherever you go. That was Stories from Real Life with your host, Melvin E. Edwards. Join us again next time for another great storytelling journey. See you then.